Amanda, if you want to get started, I think we're okay.
Sure. Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the fourth annual Delaware County Sustainability Conference, hosted by the Delaware County Office of Sustainability. My name is Amanda Hagan from the Office of Delaware County Office in Data and Mapping Innovation. Today, I will be serving as the host of today's session, providing important information to ensure that your experience in both today's session and throughout the rest of the week leaves you feeling informed and inspired. First, with some housekeeping items. The session will take place in a Zoom webinar format, meaning participants will be off camera throughout the duration of the presentation. Questions are encouraged and will be addressed following the presentation. To ask a question, you may either type in the Q&A box found at the bottom of your screen or click Raise a Hand button if you would like to ask your question out loud. Questions will be answered in order in which they were received, or if we are seeing multiple questions of a similar nature, we will bump those to the front. We will do our best to ensure that all questions have been answered. However, we will be ending the session at the top of the hour. Now, to kick off our session, we are very excited to welcome Monika Collins, who will share her presentation, Communication Strategies for Stewardship, Building a Plan That Works. Monika Collins serves as Chief Advancement Officer at the Foundation for Delaware County, overseeing advancement and donor services activities of the foundation. With 15 years in fundraising, she previously held positions in senior leadership at the Illinois Humanities Council and Science Center. A chartered advisor in philanthropy, she holds an MA in medieval history from the University of Chicago. Monika lives in media with her husband and 2 sons. Now I'll turn it over to Monika Collins.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go ahead and start by sharing my screen. All right. Can everyone hear or see okay?
Yes.
It's like perfect. All right. Wonderful. So first off, thank you all for having me here today. I'm always very excited to talk to our local nonprofit partners and be able to share information with you. So as Amanda mentioned, I've had about 15 years of experience in fundraising and have worked the gambit of, small shops, mid-sized shops, and was a consultant for a few years back there. So I'm pretty familiar with the lay of the land of the nonprofit world. And as so many of you in that world know, you don't really start off as a fundraiser. So just a bit more background. 15 years ago, I ended up getting a job at the Illinois Humanities Council. I was fresh out of grad school, looking for something to do, and ended up with a job there. And the extent of my thought process was, the Illinois Humanities Council has humanities in their name, and I got a degree in humanities, so bada bing, there we go. I really didn't understand very much of development. I was hired to run their annual fund and their gala, and I understood the mechanics of that and thought, that would be fine. Well, first day on the job, the program director comes over to me and hands me a big pile of files and said, "Here, these are yours." So it turns out the director of advancement had left, and the entire advancement department was me, not knowing anything about advancement. So I was taking over grants and major gifts and everything under the sun. And we had, a little over $1 million of a fundraising budget, which was very stressful because, again, I didn't know anything. Lucky for me, I was living in Chicago, and Chicago had a really robust nonprofit ecosystem. So not only was I able to rely on different nonprofits, leaders who kind of took me under their wing and helped me understand, what I was doing, but there were also a number of institutions there that really provided the backbone of support for nonprofits, amongst them being the Donors Forum, and then, of course, the Chicago Community Trust, which is a community foundation in Chicago. I'm very happy to be able to work for an organization that provides that same service here in Delaware County. So the foundation is really here to provide an equitable, vibrant future for our residents through philanthropy. And we do this in two different means. On the one hand, we provide a forum and a means for donors to give effectively to our local nonprofits, not only to learn about the causes and the impact that these nonprofits are doing, but also to give in a tax efficient manner. So we help facilitate their giving. But on the other end, we provide that service for nonprofits to make sure that they are robust and that they are there able to be continue on the front line, delivering vital services and advocating for change. And this looks different in a few different ways. So we provide fiscal management services for some of our smaller nonprofits. We help nonprofits start endowments so that they can really build that third leg of their fundraising stool. And we also provide educational resources and trainings for our nonprofits so they can, like I needed, really get that education and be able to grow their own practice and grow their own impact in our community. Because we all know that our nonprofits, they're underfunded, they're understaffed, and under-resourced, and we're really here to help provide them with that support. So before we get started, I was hoping to get a little bit of a sense of who's in our audience. And so if we can just do a little bit of a poll to get a sense of, what's the size of your development team that you're working with? Are you a sole practitioner? Are you part of a, larger team? So if we can set up those poll questions. All right. And then the second question is really just what is your level of experience in fundraising? Are you brand new to the field, or is it something that you have been doing for a number of years? So I'll give just a couple minutes to get some answers there.
Looks like we're having an issue with the poll where it's not showing. Oh, it's
That's
short
okay.
answer. Never mind.
That's okay.
End it. We should see it. We should see it.
All right. I can take a guess, so that's fine. That's fine. All right. So once I started in my role at the Illinois Humanities Council and sort of got the mechanics of fundraising down, I began to build the program, and I did what many different folks in fundraising do, which is I started bucketing my work. So we have a gala in October, we have our annual fund in November, we are doing these different activities throughout the year, and it's an input output. So I input work for gala, I get money back in on the other end. And, I would base my numbers on, whatever I did last year, I'm going to do again this year. Whatever number of donors I had last year, I'll have the same number of donors next year, or, some modicum of growth there. But after a few years in the field, I really started to understand what makes a successful fundraiser. And it is almost the structure of what we're measured on, which is in dollars, is not necessarily what our success will be on the other end, because our success in some respects for our organization is measured in dollars. It pays for people's salaries, it pays for our program. But our success, long-term success, is really dependent upon the quality of our relationships. And unfortunately, many organizations, like I had put my own organization on, were on an unsustainable path. So we all know the excitement of getting a donation in the door from a new supporter, which is fabulous. But there's a sobering reality, which is that the average donor retention rate for nonprofits is only 43%, which means that for every 100 donors that you're getting in the door, 57 will be gone this next year. And you can see how unsustainable that is on both ends. So on the front end, just in terms of staff burnout, that churn of trying to come up with 57 new donors or whatever that number is every year from a increasingly dwindling pool is incredibly stressful and unsustainable. And then on the other end, there is simply not that deep of a pool to be able to pull from every year, that it will increasingly be dwindling. And so, when we think about fundraising, we really need to think about it in almost two different respects. On the one hand, fundraising gets people in the door, which is great. There's some reason that they have initially started supporting the mission, but it's the stewardship piece that keeps them in the room and invites them to sit at the table. Stewardship goes beyond the thank yous for the gift, but it really is about building genuine relationships with your donors, demonstrating impact and accountability for your programs, really helping them see the vision for what you're doing and why it's important, creating those opportunities for them to engage with your organization and have that deeper connection. And then, of course, that deeper connection, inspiring continuing support with them keeps your mission alive, keeps your organization impactful, and keeps your work relevant. So a good fundraising program isn't about finding more donors, but it's really about keeping the donors you have. And that's where stewardship communication really comes in. So today, and I tried to structure this program as best I could to be very concrete and actionable, because that's always what I like when I see a presentation, and certainly what I liked when I was starting out. So hopefully today you can see at least the basics of a practical, sustainable plan that can transform one-time supporters into lifelong champions for your mission. So how do you do this? Because, of course, we're all facing these challenges. What are the specific communication challenges that your organization is facing? Well, you wear many hats. Like if you're working for a small or mid-sized organization, we all know that the development director might be running programs, the executive director is writing grants, proposals between board members. I mean, you are wearing many, many different hats, and there's only so many hours in the day. Beyond the many hats, there's also limited resources. There's not a infinite amount of money for you to spend really reaching your donors, and even to come up with communication material. Your donor management systems, if you have one, may not capture all your information. And then there's a balance between the personalization and mass communication. Again, you don't have infinite amounts of time. And if you have a robust donor base, you can't spend all of your time with all of them. There's just, again, so many hours in the day. So how do you balance, what you do with whom to make it really effective? And then, yes. And so maintaining focus is probably the hardest thing for any development professional. It's a bit like having ADD, where there's always something shiny in front of your face, and it's very difficult to get to stay focused, but you're pulled in many different directions. And so, it takes a really concerted effort to be efficient, disciplined, and focused in your work. So how would you do this? Well, it's like any other big project. It's how to eat an elephant. You really, breaking that development elephant into smaller, more palatable pieces that you can really be able to work off of. And so for the purpose of this presentation, I thought we might segment it into your elephant into 5 different key categories that you should look at when you're when you're building your development plan. So bucketing your work helps you stay on track and helps donors by you spending your time on the right stuff. So first off, segmentation. It's incredibly important to your work, and I think the first step in really building a robust and effective donor communication plan. So not all your donors are the same, and your communications shouldn't be either. The most effective and successful development programs focus on individual plans for every donor that are personally created and managed by development staff. This is an important distinction because some organizations, they might think they're pursuing a major gift by sending a specific appeal to their major givers, but in reality, that's still a direct mail program because it involves sending one broad message to many people. True major gift strategies always involve personal, individualized communication. It's one of the reasons why major gift work is so labor intensive. It takes a lot more time to pursue individual strategies with a caseload rather than just implementing a direct mail program. It takes time to build the reports. It takes time to go on meetings. It takes time to really follow up with your donors. On any given month, development staff may be speaking with some people on the phone. They might be asking for a face-to-face meeting. They may be attending an event, sending a thank you note, other mailings. It's a caseload to thank, ask, and call and meet with your donors throughout the month. And for each of your donors, the strategy is different. It's personal, it's authentic, ideally. And so, when you're thinking about starting to bucket your donors, really you need to, almost as your first step, understand what your definition of those buckets are. And so, what is your definition of a major donor? For some smaller organizations, it may be $1,000 and above, even lower. For larger nonprofits, it may be a $5,000 cumulative gift throughout the year, or even higher. It really depends on your organizations, and it's beholden to you to figure out what those bands are. The second thing to remember is that only qualified donors belong in your caseload. So these are donors who have given you a clear indication that they will welcome a closer relationship with the organization and further engagement with you. That selection process takes 2 factors into account, their inclination to give, and their inclination being that they have given a gift recently, and their capacity to give, which means that they have the funds to actually make a major gift. So, your donor that had given to you 10 years ago, they're not going to be on your list. The donors that ghost you, you haven't heard from, they don't respond to your emails, they don't respond to your outreach, they're not on your list. So if you put these things together, assuming you have 3 donors, who should receive your attention? A donor that has a net worth of $1 billion, Mackenzie Scott, who gave you $100 3 years ago. A donor that is Anna Winter and is really influential in the community and has a lot of connections and is interested in your organization. Or Joe Smith, who has a net worth of $5 million and who gave you $5,000 3 months ago. Now, I hope in that scenario, you would realize that Joe Smith is the donor that you should be paying attention to, that he's engaged and he has capacity and he can make a gift to your organization. So now that you've and I should say these buckets are broad strokes, there will be further segmentation, but at least that's a sort of being a new framework for how you segment your donors. All right, so let's say you've segmented your donors, you have your different buckets of your A, B, and C donors. So your A being your highest capacity, highest inclination donors, your B and your C moving down the line. So how do you structure your workload? A simple concept that we've all heard over and over again is the 80-20 rule, which says the majority of the revenue comes from the minority of donors. You must tier your caseload into some high and low categories. And then you must be tiering, you must let that tiering drive your planning and approach to these donors. If you don't do this, you're going to wander. You'll be out of focus. You'll be driven by personal preference, personal relationships, and emotion rather than thoughtfulness. So if you have 150 qualified donors, then you can think about it in 3 tiers for that 150. So your A's are 10 donors, your B's are 40 donors, and your C's are your 100 donors. And the truth is that the majority of your time will be spent on that A group, on those 10 donors who are going to produce the most revenue for your organization. And those top donors are going to need personalized, smart strategies for their gifts. Without tiering your file, you'll end up creating strategies that are either too impersonal because you're spreading it around and you only have so much time and you're implementing this strategy for the entire portfolio. Or you'll create personal strategies for everyone and won't have any time to implement them because you can't possibly do it with that many donors. And so it'll be less effective. Again, you have precious little time to do your work every month. And so you have to bias your efforts towards donors who can give the most. It's the one area where the size of the gift is driving really what you do. So once you have your tiers, the next thing that you might do is really figure out what your year looks like. So what are the mass communications, the big projects you have for the year, the things that are ossified? So what is your major gala and when does that happen every year? When is your annual appeal? When is your big program event? Plan out your events and special projects that you can invite your donors to and plug them into the months that they're scheduled to happen. For the A donors, A-level donors, you're going to want to create personalized notes for some of them. So for example, your gala, you might be calling personally to invite them there or sending a note on the invitation. For your C donors, it might be more just generic. They're invited without that personal touch, but really just sort of scaffolding what your year kind of looks like. And then after you've scaffolded your year, really outlining your communications basics. So an audit of your current practice, what are the, again, this is kind of scaffolding, what are the basics that we're going to do for the A group? What are the basics we're going to do for the B group? What are the basics we're going to do for the C group? What are the basics we're going to do for all of our donors? So, asking yourself, how quickly do we acknowledge the gifts? And for each of the things that you do, making sure that there's a responsible party. So who is actually acknowledging the gifts and who is responsible for each of the different tiers? How often are you communicating without asking, making sure that there is an appropriate number of touch points before you're asking for gifts? So again, you don't want your donors to feel as ATMs, but really to be invested in your mission and to feel like they're partners in the work. What stories are you telling, that you want to emphasize, that really highlight your work? And then beyond that, really setting realistic goals. So, we can acknowledge 100% of our gifts within 48 hours. Well, we've got a small staff. We're not going to be able to do that. So we're going to acknowledge 100% of our gifts within a week. And that's what we can do. So setting the goals that work best for your organization is important. So we're going to send out quarterly impact updates to our donors. Well, we don't have the staff to do that. We're going to send out biannual reports to our donors. And we're going to make personal phone calls to donors above 500, but we can't do it for every single donor that we get. And so with that scaffolding, building out a basic understanding of what you want to do for each of your different donor groups. So, your first time donors, you're going to focus on welcome and education. For your repeat donors, it's going to be emphasizing cumulative impact. For your major donors, you're going to provide exclusive updates, personal touches. For your lapsed donor, you're really going to concentrate on that re-engagement strategy, not asking for money, but really trying to get them reinvested in your mission. And so once you have this sort of basic framework down, you'll begin to, as you learn more and more about your individual donors, refine your understanding of those donors. And that means that your communications will start to be driven by your donors, not by your major gift staff. So it won't be, these are the messages, these are the programs, these are the things that we want to send out. This is a schedule that we're adhering to, and donors need to follow along, but really, what does the donor want to see, hear, and be engaged with, and how do we fit that into our plan? They'll be able to articulate the programs, the peoples, the groups, or the initiatives that they're passionate about and how they want to engage with your organization. So for example, the donor will have clear preferences about how they want to communicate with you. Some folks love getting a phone call, some people like getting a text, some people like face-to-face meetings, and others don't. So you'll get a better sense of that engagement with them. So you've got your basic scaffolding down, you are thinking about your program, and you're starting to build out an individual communications plan for each of your donors. So each of your A's, each of your B's, each of your C's, get a plan in which, you look at a 12-month or 18-month calendar, and you plan out what you're looking at for that donor. Review the month in which you're expecting a donation to come in, and then work backwards from there. So 3 to 6 months before that, you need to put your donor strategy in place to set up for that solicitation. So, for example, you're expecting a donation in November. So in August, you're going to set up that you're going to start setting up the meeting. You're going to send a report on activities in September, a thank you call in October, and then maybe along with a prospectus or a report, a proposal for that donor for that November meeting. Obviously for, longer or larger and more complex gifts, it takes a little bit longer to kind of get that set up, but it's really working backwards from when you want to do the ask and then building out that communication plan. So broad strokes, I would say that, and this, again, depends on your organization and your capacity, but broad strokes, I'd say twice a year, you want to report on specific programs that your donors are funding with the report from the field. They'll be sent at different times depending on when your donors gave the gift, but it's really what you were able to do, what your funding did and why it was impactful, tailored for your donors with increasing specificity depending on the level of your donors. So your A's get really tailored reports, your B's less so, and then your C's more general impact reports. Twice a year, thank you calls, just, thank you, hope you're doing well, hope your summer started off well. We're really very happy with your contribution and simply wanted to say thank you. Or, I always balance, have a mixed feelings about too many thank yous, because the one thing that I think organizations need to somewhat stay away from as best they can is the patron supplicant sort of mode where you're asking for money, they're giving money, and it creates a somewhat unhealthy dynamic. I really like to approach my donors and think of them as partners in the work. So critical to the effort, and much like a fellow staff member, they need to be brought into the fold of, how their piece of the work actually happens and helps. And so I do believe in, several thank yous throughout the year, but I really like the sort of softer touch, your gift made a difference. So I might, when I was at the museum, one of the things that I liked doing was, taking a picture of a program that was happening, sending a text to one of my donors and saying something along the lines of, isn't this program amazing? Look at these kids, they're so cute. I mean, just something very informal, not terribly planned, but really something that softly demonstrated that they were part of this, broader effort to make this happen. And then also, in addition to the thank yous and the you made a difference outreach, really building in the I know you communications. So this is, based on your meetings with your donors, what are you hearing from them? What are the things that they care about? What are the issues that they're interested in? And then sending them something that relates to that. So I had a donor who was interested in how nature impacted childhood uh, uh, um, childhood health, or childhood development. And so I actually, looked up some academic papers that conveyed this idea, and sent him a few studies that showed that exposure in nature actually had beneficial long-term impacts on children. And so that would be something that you could send. So it might be an email link, it might be a newspaper article that you cut out, really something that just shows that you were listening to what your donor was interested and said, and that you are following up with on that conversation. Obviously, another touch point is the invitations to the various events that you have, either inviting them to come as your guest to your gala, or picking up the phone and calling them to personally invite them, or, asking them to come and visit one of your programs. So, the program in action, really seeing the impact of their gift, meeting some of, the participants in the program, and really showing that sort of direct impact. It can also be beyond the event invites. It can be, we run a scholarship program here at the foundation, and the students often write letters, personal handwritten letters to the donors of that scholarship program. And I can tell you that they just, that is their bread and butter. They love it. Just hearing from sort of the mouth of babes, how this scholarship has really impacted them directly, has been an important touch point for those donors. And then, of course, there are the cultivation face-to-face visits, keeping in mind that every visit, every in-person coffee or meeting should not be a solicitation, that you should definitely have some visits were just about talking about the impact, asking your donors' opinions about how things are going, getting their feedback, asking how the relationship is, really getting to know them, hearing about their family, learning more about their passions, their interests. It's really just it's sort of a touch point meeting. And then, of course, the other ones are solicitation meetings, and those you set up, well in advance. There's an agenda. You let the donors know well ahead of time that that's the purpose of the meeting, so they're not blindsided, but really keeping your meetings beyond the ask, that there's several different reasons why you might be meeting in person with the donor. So those are pretty much the main overall strategies that you need to develop for a 12-month period for your caseload. And then once you've loaded these into your system or spreadsheets, you'll have your moves associated with each strategy. So Bob Smith gets touch points throughout the year. Jane Doe gets touch points. And then, you would enter those tactics or move management into your system or simply into your calendar. And then you know what your to-dos look like for the day. So for example, a few moves that come from a strategy might look like this. In January, you're going to send a project report to one of your donors, break that down into your constituent tasks. So one move would be to alert the program team to start putting together the data for the report. Another move would to be let your communications team know that they're going to need to take that data and put it into a report to create the piece for your donor. To give them, et cetera, et cetera. Or, if you're a one-man shop, that in January you need to start pulling data, and in February you need to start thinking about how to craft your beautiful report. So there's that. And then beyond your A and B donors, because that again is going to take up the majority of your time, it doesn't mean that you're ignoring your C donors. It still means that you have monthly touch points for your C donors, your tier C donors, except that they will be less personalized and more broad-based. So, for example, you may have a newsletter that goes out, and you put for your C donors a sticky note on it that says thanks them for their support, and stick it in the mail. Now, for your A-level donors, they may get a personalized letter with a note attached to it specifically outlining a article in your newsletter that you think that they would be interested in, and then their envelope is personally handwritten by you before sending. So kind of broad strokes, this is what your program would look like. So a bit of a note on your donors and the reporting on your impact. So I believe that anecdotally, the lack of reporting on impact is the main reason why organizations don't get reoccurring gifts. They can, to some degree, be good at thanking donors, but the donors donors like to be thanked, but they didn't come to the organization to be thanked. They came to see, what the impact of their gift could do. And without demonstrating that impact, I think you lose them because they don't really see what good their money has done. So it's critical. And for your A-level donors, the way you report on impact is going to be highly specific. You can't treat all your donors the same with the impact, with reporting on impact. They want to know specifically what their impact is doing. And so it can't just be a generic, number of people, et cetera, et cetera. It might be a personalized story about something that they really care about. It might be that their dollars helped fund this specific program, and that this specific program had, XYZ impacts on the people who were part of the program. So it's really tailored to them. I think, for your C donors, that's when you get into a more generic impact report that you can send them. The second piece is really knowing your donor story. There's a reason why they came to you and why they donated to your organization. And so gathering information on not only their passions and interests, but why they have those passions and interests can allow you to craft very specific touch points and stories for your donors to help keep them engaged. It'll drive, how you're engaging with them throughout the year. And so, when you gather that information, and this is what we're all terribly bad about, making sure to capture it in a way that it lives in perpetuity. So in their record, pinned to the top, really understanding of who your donor is and, why they're engaged with your organization. And then, within that sort of donor story, understanding how they want to engage. So for some donors, it's really about, they want to be involved in a community. They were working towards a common goal. For others, it's really they want to see the needle moved on a particular issue and they see you as a vehicle to make that happen. And there are different ways to think about stewardship within your mission. And something I would invite you um, to imagine. So for each organization, stewardship is going to look a little bit different in terms of your sort of program touch points. And, really leaning into what special sauce you have is a good way to go. So I'll give an example because I think I'm kind of dancing around this. For natural lands, they do a wonderful job of stewardship, and for their planned giving donors, for the donors that they know are part of a community, want to be part of a community, they actually organize group hikes at all of their different preserves. And so all of the people who are part of the society meet up once or twice a year. They go on a group hike, they get to know each other. So it's really for them about building community and building that understanding about the longevity of that organization. For others, other donors I've had, they are investment bankers and they work 60 hours a week. They don't have time for a hike. They have no interest in, being involved in community at all. What they want to see is impact. And so for that, it's really, spending time working on that report that shows impact and then engaging with them as a thought partner so that they are part of, crafting the solution for whatever problem we're trying to solve, or, really helping us connect with others in the community that they feel might be important or interested in our work. So helping make those connections is another way that, groups have been or individuals can engage with your organization that's meaningful to them. And so really it's sort of understanding your donor's persona and what drives them, what is really what they're looking for. And I'll give you an example that is from early in my career when I was at the council. That it's going to seem obvious when I explain it, but it was a big aha moment for me. So I was trying to solicit one of my donors for a big gift for some project that we were working on, and I was going on and on about how it was going to be a corporate sponsorship, and he was one of the partners at this corporate law firm. And I was going on and on about how the corporation's name is going to be in lights, and it's going to be on this billboard and that billboard, and yada yada yada. And at some point of my spiel, he turned to me and he said, "Oh, I don't care." And I was taken aback a little bit, and he said, "Listen, I'm a corporate law firm. Our our audience are businesses, are other law firms like government. We don't care about having our name in lights. In fact, it doesn't matter to us at all." He said, the thing that matters to us in terms of our sponsorship is ensuring that we keep the associates that we bring into the firm. So whatever you can give me in terms of special backstage VIP access that I can provide to them, that's what I'm looking for. So, tickets to the theater, a VIP lounge, meeting celebrities, whatever that is. He's like, that's what I care about. But he's like, I don't care if our name is, everywhere. It doesn't really matter. And so, as simple as it is, it was an aha moment for me in my own work, and really caused me to, moving forward, imagine myself in the position of that donor and, if I was them, what would I want to see, engage with, hear, etc., and then trying to build that idea out into the plan. All right. So going back to an earlier slide of nonprofits, you're wearing many hats, you have many things on your plate. How do you possibly do all of the things I've just listed when you're constantly putting out fires and there's just not enough of you? This is where I would say, one, build the program that works for you. So if it isn't, again, you can do monthly touch points. Maybe it's every other month touch points for your top donors, and working with your capacity there. But there's also, I would say lean into some efficiencies. So build out templates for your emails, for your reports, things that you can do a bit of a plug and play and then be able to use. Use AI when you're stuck on an email and need to get started. Use it to sort of craft a response, however it may be. I think it could be a very useful and helpful tool. That being said, I say this with I'll say this, be very, 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 very cautious in using AI because one of the issues, and I've experienced it on the funding side of things, is if you get a generic solicitation or a generic report and it's written by AI, it's not the end of the world. It's not great, but it's not the worst thing. If you get a personal I know you email and it is clearly written by AI, you will lose your donors because you will have lost their trust. So just use it as a jumping off point, but not as the end all be all. Whatever you do, heavily edit, and whatever you do, make sure that you have somebody else look at. And then with that in mind, I would also suggest that in building your development plan, make sure that there's some accountability so that there is someone else if you're a one-stop shop, someone else that you're really relying on and talking to about your donor plans and about whether or not you've done them. So have every other week meetings or monthly meetings with with other staff members, other development staff, your ED, your advancement chair of your board chair, where there's just some accountability that, like, listen, I have had these 20 people that I'm supposed to do something with, and I actually did it. It's too easy, especially within development, to kick the can down the road. And without that accountability of another person, it really is too easy to punt. And so I would suggest, just building in a set meeting with your staff or with your board that keeps you on track with your development activities. All right. And so a couple other common pitfalls that I just wanted to mention are, that I somewhat touched upon, are over communicating the ask, under communicating the impact. Certainly, make sure that you are um, um, balancing the two. Inconsistent communication schedule, you're only reaching out once a year, obviously relying on generic mass communication without that personal touch point, and then focusing only on your major donors. So, again, while you should focus the majority of your time on your major donors, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't spend no time with your C-tier donors, that you should really build a plan that works for you, that does give some touch points to everyone throughout the year. Ultimately, your donors want to see their investment make a difference. They want to feel connected to your work. They want to feel part of something larger than themselves. Your job is to help them see that their support is changing lives and changing your community. So whatever your capacity is, just start small, be consistent, and remember that every communication is an opportunity to deepen the relationship that advances your mission. So I'll end with this. Effective stewardship isn't about having perfect systems or unlimited resources. None of us have those. None of us will ever have those. It is really just about consistency, authenticity, and remembering that behind every donation, this is sort of the part that you bring to the work, is behind every donation is a person who chose to believe in your mission and to make the world a bit brighter and better. So keep that in mind. And with that, I will stop sharing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Monica, for sharing all of that important information. I think that this, and as I've mentioned to you, is ever more important as we're seeing kind of those federal or state grants become a little bit more tricky. So the emphasis on more localized donors is incredibly important. So at this time, we do have a couple minutes for questions. Again, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or raise a hand if you would like to speak a question. And while we are waiting for those to come in, I actually have a couple questions, if
All
that's
right.
okay. So to kick us off, I think it really hit home about meeting with donors and really understanding what they care about and what's important to them. As a new office here, do you have kind of any recommendations or what that might look like as that first meeting, as again, an organization that there's only two of us. We don't have a dedicated development staff. What do those meetings really look like to get to know your donors?
So if you're new to development and you've sort of had this passive role before, my first suggestion would be to send an email to your donors that says, can I have 15 minutes of your time or half an hour for coffee? I want to give you an update on, we're going to have an agenda item and it's going to be three things. I'm going to give you an update on what we've done. I'm going to give you a sense of, what we have planned for the near term, what we have planned um, for the future, for the broader future, and then, what your donation has helped us do. And then from that meeting, uh, you know, some will decline, some will say yes. And then in that meeting of, what the organization does, you really, and it comes somewhat organically, you kind of ask them, how they get started. So, what brought you to the organization? How did you find out about us? How did you, um, what compels you to become involved? How have you been involved in similar organizations? And you sort of get their life story out of that. And I think it's just you in those meetings, remember that it's not about you, it's about the donor. And so mostly be quiet and just ask them questions about themselves, questions about their story, questions about their program, or about their path, and then you sort of get a sense of that. I do like to though go into a meeting with a few different things I want to know about them, like do they have children? Um, I don't ask this, but you get a sense of like how old are they? Where do they live? What other organizations are they involved in? What are the things that they're passionate about? So, there's a little list of things I will subtly bring up or ask them about in that meeting to try and get a sense. And, not every meeting you're going to get all of the little buckets filled, but at least you can get some sort of broad strokes about that. And then, after the meeting, make sure you send, it's sort of like an interview. Make sure you send a thank you. Appreciate your time. I look forward to further engaging me or engaging you. You'll hear from me in this other way. And then that sets you up for the next touch point so that they know that's coming down the line.
Wonderful. Thank you. And in the same vein, we did have a question from an anonymous attendee, which asked, how do you make phone connections connect so smoothly?
It depends on the donor. And so I like to save my phone connections for thank yous because when you get a phone connection thank you, it's not as arresting as other kinds of communications. But and you'll get a sense for them as time goes on, whether or not they're happy to pick up the phone and oh Monica, lovely to hear from you. What have you been up to? Or if it's why are you calling me? Oh. So if it is so if it's the former, then I won't set it up and I'll just, give them a ring and just saying hi, you want to grab coffee, sort of, I do treat my donors and I really try to keep this in mind more as partners and friends than as that sort of supplicant mode. So it really is, hi Barbara, hope you're well, want to grab coffee kind of thing. If it is the latter type of donor who does not like getting random phone calls, I will send an email letting them know that I'm going to call at a particular time and that what I'm calling about. And so then that sets them up. They cannot answer, and then I will leave a message to either call me back or, um, if they wish. If they don't, then I know, leave them alone. But I'll set it up so that they don't feel, you know, like it's out of the blue. So,
Wonderful. And we'll end on this last question before turning it back over to Amanda. And this is, how do small organizations know which type of sponsors they should be targeting for sponsorship opportunities?
um, I think, well, it's a broad question, but I would say broadly, um, look at what they want and what they're interested in and the other organizations that they've sponsored. So, for example, I had an organization come to me recently, teeny tiny, and they said, how do we get in front of Comcast? We, really want, they are interested in X, Y, and Z, and we think we'd be a good fit. And to be quite frank, the what Comcast would be interested in this bucket is not necessarily community impact, but visibility. And so this organization and their program, they're not going to appeal to a Comcast because the visibility just isn't there. And so understanding the pressure points or the motivations of your sponsors is going to give you the most successful sponsorship ask. And then you can, tailor your, once you understand their motivations, and this can be from a preliminary call or just by looking for their website, seeing what else they sponsor, then you can tailor your sponsorship proposal, which I would suggest for any sponsorship ask is having a sponsorship proposal. You can tailor your sponsorship ask and proposal to that organization. So by, the ask can be teasing out the things that would be most important to them. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And I'll turn it back over to our host, Amanda.
Thank you. Thank you again to our wonderful speaker, Monika, and all who have attended in today's presentation. Following the close of this session, you will be asked to provide your feedback to our speakers in a brief Zoom survey. We appreciate your time in completing this form. The next session in the 4th Annual Sustainability Conference is Reviving the Past for Sustainable Features, a case study of the Lazaretto Quarantine Station and the sustainability of adaptive reuse. Will be presented in just a couple hours from now at noon. If you did not sign up prior, please visit delcopa.gov/sustainability/conference to sign up. Finally, we would like to invite you all to attend our closing keynote celebration on Saturday, June 15th or June 14th at the Lazaretto in Tinicum Township. This event will include a breakfast and a keynote presentation from Glenn the Hurricane Schwartz, and will be followed by an EV Expo, networking with more than 30 local organizations, and museum tours in the historic Lazaretto Quarantine Station. Walk-ins are welcome. I thank you again for your participation in the 4th Annual Delaware Sustainability Conference. Have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you.